Have you ever tried to really get a grasp on something big? Like a really complex idea or a whole field of knowledge, but it always feels like you're just barely scratching the surface.
Like you can sense there's this deeper level of understanding out there, but you can't quite reach it.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like that feeling you get when you're looking out at the ocean and you know there's so much more beneath the surface than what you can see from the shore.
And that's exactly what brilliant thinkers throughout history have wrestled with.
Oh, absolutely, like someone like Al-Farabi.
Right. Back in the Islamic Empire, centuries ago, he was grappling with the incredibly influential writings of Aristotle.
Trying to make sense of it all.
Imagine trying to navigate this massive library of ancient thought.
Wow, that's a great analogy.
And that's precisely what we aim to do with the deep dive.
We take on a fascinating subject and we sort of distill it down to the key insights, the stuff that still matters today.
All without you having to sift through mountains of information yourself.
Exactly. It's like a shortcut to being well-informed.
So today we're diving into Al-Farabi's thinking on logic and language.
Oh, this is going to be good.
We'll be looking closely at his own writings, particularly what are called the Book of Letters.
And of course, his commentaries on Aristotle's Organon.
Now, the Organon is essentially Aristotle's collection of foundational texts on logic.
Kind of like a toolkit for reasoning.
Exactly. And Al-Farabi was deeply immersed in these texts.
But what's really fascinating is that he didn't just see logic as, a bunch of abstract rules.
For him, it was all intertwined with how we use language in our everyday lives.
To understand the world around us.
To share our thoughts and ideas with each other.
And even to achieve a kind of intellectual fulfillment. That's what he believed.
He really saw this deep connection between language, logic, and the pursuit of knowledge.
And that's why we think this is so relevant to everyone listening.
Al-Farabi's perspective gives us a whole new way of thinking about how we learn, how we construct arguments.
And how we use language effectively to get our points across.
It's about communication, it's about understanding, it's about thinking clearly.
We're going to be uncovering some pretty unexpected angles, too.
Like Al-Farabi's ideas about where language might have come from in the first place.
Oh, right. And the connections he saw between logic and things like poetry and music.
That's really fascinating stuff.
And we're going to make sure to explain these complex ideas in a way that's clear and understandable.
So you come away feeling enriched, not overwhelmed.
Now, before we jump in, it's important to remember the intellectual world Al-Farabi was living in.
He wasn't just reading Aristotle in a vacuum.
He was bringing in ideas from other sources, too.
Like Neoplatonic philosophy.
Right, which was very popular back then.
It emphasized things like abstract forms and a hierarchical universe.
And of course, he was also deeply steeped in the Arabic language itself.
This blend of influences shaped his unique viewpoint.
Okay, let's start with something fundamental. How language and concepts are related to each other.
Al-Farabi had some really interesting ideas about how language even begins.
Oh, yeah. He didn't think it just appeared out of nowhere, right?
Exactly. Imagine a community of people who have these primary concepts.
Primary concepts.
These are the basic understandings they've formed from their experiences in the world.
Like recognizing objects.
Distinguishing different types of things.
So they've got these basic mental building blocks.
But they don't yet have a shared system of spoken language.
It's like they've got the ideas, but no words to express them yet.
Exactly. And Al-Farabi proposed that the first step toward language happens when this community realizes that, hey, we could communicate so much better.
If we all agree on certain sounds to represent those concepts.
Precisely. Like a shared understanding that a specific sound means a specific thing.
It's like creating a code.
He even suggests that there might be a lawmaker involved.
Lawmaker.
Someone who plays a role in establishing this initial framework.
Like introducing more words to the community.
Yeah, almost like creating a basic vocabulary.
That sounds pretty intentional, doesn't it?
It does. But the main idea is that language is not something we're born with.
It's a shared agreement, a social construct.
Once this link between sounds and basic meanings is there, Al-Farabi believed that people would naturally try to refine the language.
To better reflect the relationships between those concepts.
Exactly. Like if two concepts are closely related in our minds, people would try to find words that have a similar connection.
For example, if we have the concept of small and then tiny.
We might look for words that have a similar kind of diminution to them.
Right. It's like we're trying to create a mirror image of our thoughts in the structure of our language.
Exactly. But Al-Farabi recognized that this process isn't always perfect.
there can be hiccups along the way.
He pointed out that sometimes a single word can end up being used for two different concepts.
That's what we call homonymy, right?
Exactly. Or we might use metaphors where a word that's meant for one thing is used to describe something else based on a perceived similarity.
Like the leg of a chair, even though chairs don't really have legs.
Precisely. And Al-Farabi had some concerns about these linguistic quirks,
He thought they could lead to confusion.
especially when it came to teaching, particularly in philosophy.
If the words don't clearly correspond to the concepts, how can you effectively convey knowledge?
Right. It's like trying to build a house with mismatched bricks.
And he also worried that these ambiguities could introduce errors into logical reasoning.
If the connection between concepts isn't clear in the language, it becomes harder to determine if an argument really holds up.
So in his ideal view, the structure of language should be a clear representation of our thoughts and the world as we perceive it.
Exactly. And this brings us to his idea of secondary concepts.
Secondary concepts.
These are concepts that classify other concepts.
Okay, so not concepts about things in the world, but concepts about other concepts.
Precisely. Like the terms genus and species.
Genus being a broader category like animal and species being more specific like dog or cat.
Exactly. Al-Farabi believed these secondary concepts emerged as we reflect on our primary concepts and their relationships.
It's like building a hierarchy of knowledge.
Right. We start with individual things, then we group them into categories based on shared characteristics.
And this is where his advice for philosophers translating technical terms comes in.
He stressed the need for clarity and precision when introducing philosophical ideas from one language to another.
To avoid those potential mismatches in meaning.
Precisely. Because even slight differences in translation can have a huge impact on how we understand complex ideas.
Okay, so we've got language developing to communicate our understanding of the world. Now, where does logic fit into all of this, especially in a social context?
This is where things get really interesting. Al-Farabi saw language as a tool that unlocks new ways of handling concepts, particularly in social interactions.
Because with language, we can share ideas, debate, and learn from each other.
Exactly. He talked about the development of arts.
Arts in the sense of skills or disciplines.
Right. Skills that have their own specific methods and rules.
And these arts are all based on language.
Precisely. Like rhetoric, the art of persuasion.
Using language to convince people to believe or do certain things.
Exactly. And alongside rhetoric, Al-Farabi placed poetry.
Which he saw as using language to evoke specific emotional states.
He believed both rhetoric and poetry were particularly valuable for religious and political leaders.
To inspire and guide people.
Now, there's also a less celebrated art that Al-Farabi included.
Sophistry.
Sophistry, the art of using clever but flawed arguments to make your point.
Ah, the art of deception.
Right. It's a bit of an odd one out. It seems he included it because it was part of the traditional curriculum of Aristotle's works.
So language allows us to persuade, to evoke emotions, and even to be deliberately misleading. What happens next in this intellectual evolution?
Well, as language becomes more widespread, people inevitably encounter different viewpoints.
Especially when it comes to fundamental questions about the world.
This leads to the development of dialectics, or debate, as a way to try to resolve those disagreements.
But debate isn't necessarily about finding the absolute truth, is it?
It's more about constructing the most compelling argument, even if the premises are not entirely correct.
It's like a game of intellectual chess.
And Al-Farabi recognized this limitation. He understood that winning a debate doesn't guarantee that the conclusion is actually true.
Right. You could have a perfectly structured argument based on faulty information.
Exactly. And this realization led some thinkers to seek more reliable methods for acquiring knowledge.
Which brings us to demonstration.
The process of establishing truths with certainty.
Al-Farabi believed that Plato was the first to recognize this crucial distinction between dialectics and demonstration.
And he credited Aristotle with laying out the rules for demonstration in his work, Posterior Analytics.
So it's like a hierarchy of logical tools.
From simple communication to rigorous methods of proof.
And it all stems from the social nature of language and the need to deal with concepts in different ways.
Precisely. And Al-Farabi was very interested in classifying these different logical arts.
Sometimes based on their social purpose, sometimes based on how Aristotle categorized them.
He also paid close attention to the starting points or premises used in each type of logic.
Rhetoric relies on premises that the audience already accepts.
Dialectics uses premises that are at least plausible.
And demonstration demands premises that are demonstrably true.
Exactly. Now, one interesting thing Al-Farabi did was extend the concept of rhetoric to include expert reasoning in fields like medicine and agriculture.
That's unexpected. How does rhetoric apply to those areas?
Well, he observed that when a doctor is deciding on a treatment for a specific patient,
Or when a farmer is figuring out the best way to cultivate a particular field.
the conclusions they reach apply to those specific cases, not to universal principles.
It's about making decisions based on the particular context.
And Al-Farabi categorized this type of reasoning as a form of rhetoric.
Wow, that actually makes a lot of sense.
It broadens our understanding of what rhetoric can encompass.
He also addressed induction and analogy, trying to show how they ultimately fit within the framework of syllogistic reasoning.
And he even distinguished between two forms of analogy, talil and tarkib, based on how the middle term connecting the premises is found.
Okay, so we've talked about the social origins of logic and how language enables these different modes of reasoning. Now, what about the role of questions in all of this?
Questions are absolutely crucial in Al-Farabi's thinking.
Because they're how we probe for deeper understanding.
He made a fundamental distinction between two types of questions,
Go on.
those that seek commitment and those that seek knowledge or information.
Okay, so in a debate, for example, the questions aren't really about getting new information.
It's more about trying to get your opponent to agree to something that you can then use to challenge their position.
It's like setting a trap.
Exactly. He outlines the structure of a debate where you have a questioner and a responder.
And the questioner's goal is to refute the responder's views.
By eliciting their agreement to a question that presents two incompatible options.
The responder has to choose one, and then the questioner tries to expose a contradiction in their reasoning. It sounds intense.
It can be, but Al-Farabi saw real value in this process.
It's not just about winning an argument.
It's about training your mind to be precise and systematic.
And to identify and eliminate flawed thinking.
He even suggested that this question and answer dynamic could be a model for teaching and research.
It's like the Socratic method.
Now, when it comes to questions that aim to gain information, Al-Farabi was deeply influenced by Aristotle's use of question words in the Organon.
Like how much, how, where, when.
Exactly. Aristotle used these words to classify different types of concepts.
And Al-Farabi added what and which to the list.
He also observed that the answer to these questions often correspond to categories like quantity, quality, and essence.
It's like our natural curiosity is structured around these fundamental questions.
And he also analyzed Aristotle's posterior analytics, where Aristotle identifies the four things we seek to know.
That it is, why it is, what it is, and which it is.
Al-Farabi added a fifth. Is it the case that?
And he believed that by asking these philosophical questions, we could uncover profound truths about the nature of things.
Leading to definitions of genus, species, and essence.
It's like acting as philosophers simply by asking the right questions.
Exactly. Though Al-Farabi's attempt to connect these philosophical questions to everyday language wasn't always successful.
Yeah, like asking what is it about a date palm and getting the answer, it's a body.
Right. It's not exactly the most helpful response in a casual conversation.
But it does raise some really interesting questions about the nature and purpose of questions themselves.
Something that philosophers continue to debate today.
Okay, so we've covered language, social logic, and the importance of questions. Now, how did Al-Farabi actually define logic? What was its core subject matter?
Al-Farabi had a very systematic approach to defining things.
He built upon the work of Aristotle.
He argued that arts and sciences are distinguished by their subjects and the features they investigate.
So if two fields study the same subject, they're essentially the same field.
But if their subjects differ, then they're distinct.
Okay, and what did he consider to be the primary subjects of logic?
What's really interesting is that he said the primary subjects of logic are primary concepts.
Those basic understandings we have of the world.
The same primary concepts that other fields like mathematics and natural science study.
But logic approaches these concepts from a unique perspective.
Exactly. It focuses on specific features that he called logical features.
Logical features.
Things like being signified by expressions.
In other words, words.
Right. Being universals applying to many things.
Being predicates or subjects in statements.
Being definable in relation to other concepts.
And being the focus of questions.
Exactly. And logic then investigates how these primary concepts are combined, focusing on those logical features.
So it's not about the specific content of those concepts, but about how they're structured and how they relate to each other logically.
Precisely. It's like studying the grammar of thought.
And these logical features themselves are actually secondary concepts, right?
Exactly. Concepts about concepts.
That's what sets logic apart from other fields.
It's the study of the underlying framework of our understanding.
Now, some people have argued that Al-Farabi's definition of logic is a bit too broad,
Because it could potentially include things that we wouldn't normally consider part of logic today.
like rhetoric or even grammar,
Right. And it seems that Al-Farabi was influenced by the Neoplatonic view that logic essentially encompassed everything in Aristotle's Organon.
which is a pretty wide-ranging collection of works,
He even offered a more general definition in his catalog.
where he said logic studies concepts as signified by expressions and expressions as signifying concepts.
That does sound pretty encompassing.
And there's also the issue of the categories being included at the beginning of the logic curriculum.
It's not always clear how the different types of predicates discussed in the categories are directly relevant to later logical studies.
So while Al-Farabi's framework for understanding logic is incredibly comprehensive,
Its precise boundaries and the inclusion of certain topics remain open to interpretation.
okay, let's move on to Al-Farabi's ideas about truth and falsehood, which also have some really interesting elements.
He was very precise in how he defined truth.
How so?
He said, a concept is true if it exists in the external world in the same way that it exists in the mind.
So there has to be a correspondence between our mental understanding and objective reality.
Exactly. And this definition wasn't limited to propositions or statements.
Even individual concepts could be considered true or false,
He used the example of the concept of a vacuum.
which, according to the scientific understanding of his time, didn't actually exist in the physical world.
So it wasn't a true concept.
Makes sense.
He also used the term tuddick, which can mean verification or assent.
So coming to know that something is true or agreeing to treat it as true.
Exactly. And he pointed out that tuddick can apply to both simple concepts and more complex propositions.
So we can verify or assent to both basic ideas and full-blown statements.
Precisely. And this was a point where his views differed from later thinkers like Avicenna.
Now, what about negation? How did Al-Farabi understand the difference between true and false statements involving the word not?
He explored various types of negation.
And one that he paid particular attention to was what he called metathetic negation.
Where you attach the negative particle to a noun to create terms like not just.
So instead of simply denying the original quality, you're affirming a different quality.
Like saying a very young child is not just, isn't just saying they're not just, it's affirming their state of being a child.
It's a subtle but important distinction.
He also discussed how commands like come here aren't true or false because they're directives, not statements about reality.
But statements about commands like you must come here do have a truth value.
Depending on the context and the authority of the speaker.
That's an interesting point.
And then there's his fascinating perspective on future contingent statements.
Statements about events that haven't happened yet.
He argued that a disjunction about the future like either the sun will rise tomorrow or it won't is necessarily true.
Because one of those possibilities has to be the case.
But neither of the specific future events, the sun will rise tomorrow or the sun won't rise tomorrow, is necessarily true right now.
Because the future is still open.
Even though he acknowledged that God has complete knowledge of the future.
So even with divine foreknowledge, the truth value of a future event isn't fixed in the present.
That's a very nuanced and complex view.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about Al-Farabi's analysis of the Arabic language.
He spent quite a bit of time comparing Arabic to other languages like Greek and Syriac.
And he seemed to have a particular admiration for Greek, didn't he?
He viewed it as a kind of ideal logical language.
Where the grammatical structure more closely aligned with logical forms?
Exactly. But his goal wasn't to create some perfect philosophical language.
He was more interested in understanding how well Arabic could serve philosophical and logical purposes.
Right. He started by identifying the basic components of sentences used in syllogisms.
Like nouns and particles.
He pointed out that nouns signify primary concepts, both particulars and universals.
And particles include things like quantifiers and the copula.
He also introduced the distinction between permanent concepts like human and temporary concepts or accidents like being tall.
And he argued that language should reflect this temporal dimension with the use of tenses.
His analysis of tenses in Arabic was quite insightful, although it wasn't completely exhaustive.
He also had some fascinating things to say about Arabic verbs.
He noted how they often combine a primary concept, a copular element, and a tense all within a single word.
And he gave the example of tanasa, meaning becoming a human.
Exactly. He even argued that the word kana, which means was, in certain contexts, expresses pure tense without functioning as a copula.
So his analysis of Arabic was deeply intertwined with his philosophical interests.
He was essentially trying to understand the strengths and limitations of the language as a tool for philosophical inquiry.
Okay, finally, let's talk about something I found especially intriguing. Al-Farabi's connections between logic and the arts, particularly poetry and music.
This is one of the areas where his thinking really shines.
How did he see these seemingly different domains as related?
But he argued that music theory shares certain underlying principles with logic.
And so do rhetoric and poetry.
He pointed out the close link between poetry and music.
Poetry is often enhanced when set to music.
And he also observed formal similarity.
Both poetry and music are constructed from a finite set of elements.
Letters in poetry and musical notes in music.
But he didn't consider music on its own to be a syllogistic art, right?
Correct. Because syllogisms are inherently verbal.
They involve language.
But he did explore how poetry, even though it doesn't always present itself in a strictly logical format, can still compel belief or assent.
It can persuade us even if it's not laying out a formal argument.
Exactly. And he suggested that this is because poetry engages our imagination and appeals to our emotions.
It can convey a deeper truth, even if the literal statements within the poem aren't factually accurate.
Precisely. And he went even further, suggesting that poetry often contains text that is potentially a syllogism.
Meaning that the logical structure is there implicitly, even if it's not explicitly stated.
Like the poem might provide the conclusion, and the listener has to fill in the missing premises using their imagination.
It's like a puzzle that we have to solve.
He gave the example of a line by the poet Abu Tamam about knowledge residing in gleaming spheres.
The poem doesn't explicitly state the premises, but it evokes the idea of victory and the certainty that comes with it.
Which we can then connect to the concept of knowledge.
Now, there's also that seemingly contradictory statement in his canons where he called poetic discourse absolutely false.
That seems to reflect a more strict Neoplatonic perspective on truth.
But in his later work, Proportion, he offered a more nuanced view.
He argued that poetry's primary aim isn't to convey literal truth or falsehood, but to stir the imagination and evoke emotions.
So even if a poem contains statements that are factually incorrect, it can still communicate a deeper poetic truth.
Exactly. And this connection between logic and the arts highlights Al-Farabi's holistic understanding of human thought and understanding.
He saw logic as being intertwined with our rational faculties and our imaginative capacities.
So what are some key takeaways from our deep dive into Al-Farabi's ideas?
Well, firstly, he offered a fascinating perspective on the origins of language.
He saw it as a social construct that evolved from a shared need to communicate our understanding of the world.
He also traced the development of logic from simple dialogue to complex methods of proof,
highlighting the importance of questions in both debate and scientific inquiry.
His definition of logic as the study of the logical features of concepts is really thought-provoking.
As are his intricate views on truth and falsehood, including his unique perspective on future contingent statements.
And his analysis of the Arabic language sheds light on his broader philosophical project
of understanding the relationship between language, thought, and reality.
And finally, his connections between logic and the arts, like poetry and music, remind us that logic isn't just about cold, hard reasoning.
It's also connected to our creativity and our ability to appreciate beauty and meaning.
This has been an incredible journey through Al-Farabi's thinking.
And we hope it's given you a new appreciation for the power of language and the importance of logic in our lives.
If you're interested in exploring Al-Farabi's ideas further, we encourage you to check out his original works.
Or delve into the rich and fascinating world of Arabic philosophy.
And here's a final thought to leave you with. If language shapes our understanding of concepts, to what extent do the structures of our native languages either limit or expand our philosophical horizons?
And how can we apply Al-Farabi's principles of logic and clear thinking to navigate the complexities of our modern world in a way that enriches our lives and deepens our understanding of ourselves and the universe around us?